Hello, and welcome to this week's Dear Old Date Update, brought to you by Penn State Sports Night. I'm Annika Wagner, joined alongside Jeremy Rose to bring you updates from all across Happy Valley. From a statement hired by Penn State football to dominant Big Ten wrestling matchups and a huge series win in Pagula, our beat reporters have a lot to catch you up on. Stay tuned.
Just yesterday, Penn State football announced the hiring of new defensive coordinator Jim Knowles. Known for his creative defensive scheme and play calling, Knowles joins James Franklin's staff on a 3-year, $9 million deal. The coach was taken from the Ohio State Buckeyes, who won the national championship a week ago tonight. Knowles' defense was the only defense to hold Penn State under 24 points last season. So, Annika, where does this lead the Nittany Lions as they head into their 2025 campaign?
Well, Jeremy, defensively, hopes are high. Knowles commanded the number one defense in college football last season, so this is a big hire for Penn State. His defense was also able to keep Notre Dame to just 7 points in the first half of the college football national championship game. And over the past 2 seasons, Ohio State defense under Knowles was able to hold Penn State to only one offensive touchdown, not allowing one earlier in the game this season. So this is a big win, especially with Penn State's defense losing key players such as Abdul Carter and Kobe King. But the hopes are still high because they are retaining players such as Tony Rojas, Zaki Wheatley, and Denai Dennis Sutton. But this is also a strategic move for Penn State because Knowles is a coordinator that will entice players to want to play at Penn State, offensively and defensively. This is also a statement to the Big Ten, especially Ohio State, and to the rest of college football. This is one of, if not the best defensive coordinators in college football entirely. So defense will be a force to be reckoned with in the 2025 season. But Jeremy, how will the offense fare, especially without their Mackey Award-winning tight end, Tyler Warren, next year?
Yeah, I mean, complementary offense and complementary defense is how the Ohio State Buckeyes under Jim Knowles and the rest of their staff, including Ryan Day, made their way to that national title game just a week ago, And, when it comes to that complementary offense and defense, you've got Andy Koltnicki now on the side for Penn State, who now gets to take pointers from Jim Knowles, a guy who, had his answer last season, was one of the only guys to have his answer all season long. And it's going to be a lot of reliance on the big three they returned in Drew Aller and then the 2 running backs in Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. But you can't forget about wide receiver transfers, Kyron Hudson and Devontae Ross, who are going to have to make a really, really big impact early on in the season if they're going to do well down the line. We saw that struggle with Penn State this season, where they weren't able to connect the dots later on in the season. The wide receiver connection with Drew Aller was a little off, a little shaky, and that allowed Notre Dame's defense to, find the answer and eventually stop the Nittany Lions and halt their run. So, a lot of complementary football and a lot of reliance on your guys early on in the season to help them play better farther down the line. From one top 5 team to the next, we now send it over to our wrestling insiders, Nico Rodriguez and Adriana Gallucci, at the monitor for more on Cale Sanderson's squad.
Thanks, guys. The Nittany Lions wrestling season is more than halfway over. So far, the Blue and White have outscored opponents 389-19. They're currently 8-0 and 3-0 in Big Ten play. It doesn't just stop there, as the Nittany Lion is ranked in the top 11 nationally in every single weight class. So, Adriana, let's start with who has stuck out the most. For me, it has to be Braden Davis. Last year, his freshman season, he wrestled at 125, which wasn't his normal weight, and he ended up winning a Big Ten championship. And now he's wrestling at 133, where he's the number 11 133 pounder in the country. He's 7-2. The 2 losses, they weren't really dominant. They didn't really show much to me. And now he has a chance on Friday to play the number 3 133 pounder in Drake Alaya Friday at the BJC.
Yeah, when you roster guys like Carter Starachi and Greg Kirkfleet, Nico, sometimes it's hard to find those surprises. But let's stick with guys who aren't wrestling in the normal weight class. For me, it's Josh Barr. He's done a great job at 197. That opportunity opened up for him when Carter Starachi dropped down to 184. And instead of trying to cut weight and stay in that class, he decided to bulk up and go at 197. And you see the record, numbers don't lie. He's 12-0, and he's done a great job. He went into Rutgers and took down the number 16 guy in the nation, outscored him 22-6, and all those points came in the third period. So he's really somebody who knows how to sit back and relax and strike his opponent when necessary. Cale Sanderson said that when he's in the room and he's on the mat, he's a guy who just knows how to outwork everybody and use the minutes to his best. Now, there's going to be a challenge this week, this Friday, actually, at the Bryce Jordan Center. The number 2 highly contested, renowned Iowa Hawkeyes come to town. I know you want to talk about it, Nico. There's a big match. Why don't you walk us through?
Yeah, this is the one that's been circled on everybody's calendar since before the season, since last season. The Iowa Hawkeyes are coming into this one, the number 2 ranked team in the country, and the Nittany Lions, of course, number 1. It's going to be a big one, prime time, Friday night, 7 p.m. The last BJC duel was 1 p.m. Sunday. It was snowy. It was kind of spontaneously announced, but this one's going to be the moneymaker. And for me, there's one matchup that sticks out, 184, Carter Starachi versus Gabe Arnold, the number 2 versus number 6, 184 pounders in the country. So far, Arnold has been talking a lot on social media, talking that he wants to come for Starachi's head and about the BJC in general. So it's going to be a really big one. Iowa's tough. It's going to be a tension-filled matchup. Penn State's going to be a tough out. I think it's going to be fireworks all around.
Yeah, Nico, some great Big Ten wrestling. And then the week after, the Michigan Wolverines are going to come to town. Speaking of Josh Barr, he's going to have a tough task. The number 2 wrestler at that 197 class is part of that Wolverine squad. So get your tickets, get your popcorn, and head down to the BJC. Penn State will take on Iowa at the Bryce Jordan Center this Friday, January 31st. Across the street at Pagula Ice Arena, Penn State men's hockey took 4 out of 6 points on Ohio State this past weekend. Annika is now joined by Cassie Vaselis with more on the big weekend.
Thanks, Adriana and Nico. Our reporter Cassie Vaselis was at Pagula this weekend for the series. Cassie, what were the key components you saw in these big wins for Penn State?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the Ohio State game, that was a very high-scoring series. It was also very exciting with lots of goals and huge saves. Let's take a look. As you heard right there, the crowd erupted as Penn State took the sweep against number 9 Ohio State this past weekend. In December, the Nittany Lions had a tough series against the Buckeyes where they lost 0-4 and then 2-4. This time, they weren't going to let that happen again.
We've been disappointed in how we handled emotions in the past, i.e. the first game in Ohio State. But tonight, that was the opposite. I'm very proud of how the guys handled their emotions.
After going down by 3 in the second period of the first game, the blue and white had a goal to get themselves out of. It was back and forth until Danny Geniev scored with 12 seconds left, tying the game at 6 and sending it to overtime. It was time for a shootout after there was no score in overtime. Dylan Lugers became the hero after he buried a goal. Arseny Sergeyev secured the victory with his save.
It was great. Dylan was rocking tonight. Dan jump-started the momentum for us for the overtime shootout push, so it was a super cool feeling for sure.
The weekend wasn't done yet as Ohio State was looking to rebound. After a scoreless first period, Geniev found the back of the net. Nick DeGraves then got his first collegiate goal, hoping to send Penn State to victory. It wasn't enough as this game also got sent into overtime. Then Sean found Reese Laubach, who had the golden goal to give Penn State the big 3-2 win.
Unbelievable atmosphere and our team feeding off it and pulling out, and that's fantastic. That's a fantastic Penn State hockey win.
The Nittany Lions will look to use this as momentum as they head into more conference play this weekend. For Penn State Sports Night, I'm Cassie Vaselis.
Well, Cassie, Penn State men's hockey struggled earlier. Can you tell us about these second half of the season improvements? Going into January, they were 7-9 and then went 4-1-3 with a shootout loss and 2 shootout wins. So what changed for the team?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the second half, they're obviously doing a lot better. But I think if we start on the homestand that they just had, they played Michigan State, where the first game they did have a loss. But then in the second game, they rebounded. They got a shootout win. It was Dylan Lugers in that one as well. And then we look at Canisius. They got the sweep. You had Aiden Fink. He got a hat trick. So another huge series. And then lastly, what you just saw, the Ohio State series, where we had a game going to shootout, Dylan Lugris. Then we had an overtime game where Reese Lawback called a game. So obviously this homestand has been really important, playing in front of their own fans. But when we kind of look at what they have improved on, it was more just putting their game together. It wasn't that they weren't disappointed on how they're playing offensively or defensively. It was they just had to put it together. And that's what they've done. It had a lot to do with the mindset. They had to be mentally tough, and they also had to have a positive mindset and be resilient, especially in that first half of the season when they were going down against these Big Ten opponents. Now, I put up a few guys here that have really contributed in the second half of the season. I mean, I wish I could have put some more, but you had Arseny Sergeyev. He came back. He's been a huge part of this team since the beginning. Like I mentioned, Aiden Fink, he has 11 points right now since that Notre Dame series, which was right before the Michigan State series. So he's on fire. He has a Hobie Baker nominee now. And Guy Godowski says he just does what Aiden Fink does. He's one of the best players in the nation. Then I put Danny Genev in there. You got to give him some credit in that Ohio State series. He's been racking up points. And then the freshman, you have Charlie Serrato. He's one of the best in the faceoffs for the team. He's also scoring points. And you have Cade Christensen in the back. He had double-digit blocks in one of the Ohio State games. And then you have someone like Nick DeGraves, who's very gritty, very competitive, and got his first collegiate goal and got rewarded.
And we'll see if the mentality will continue, especially looking forward as Penn State will go on the road to play number 13 Michigan in Ann Arbor. And Penn State already dropped a series to Michigan earlier in the season. So, Cassie, what do they need to do in order to win this one?
Yeah, I mean, they said it in media. They got to play Penn State hockey. They have to keep that mentality tough, because if they, in the last series that we saw them play this team, they let in 16 goals within the 2 games. That is not ideal. So you have to be tough in those moments to be able to come back. Now, also, a huge, huge, huge emphasis in media was they need to stay out of the box. When we look at that last series, they let Michigan have 12 power play opportunities. You want to know how many they scored on? 8. Not ideal. So staying out of that box is going to be so crucial, because Michigan is one of the best teams in the nation in the power play. And obviously, Yost is going to be a tough environment to play in. So just, again, not letting things get to your head is huge. And then when we look after the series, they're going to take on Wisconsin and a lot more Big Ten teams. So to be able to come out with a win or 2 in this series is going to be huge for them to be able to carry it on.
Yep. We'll see if they can rack up the points there and continue to turn their season around this weekend in Ann Arbor. But for now, let's switch over to the other side of Pagula with women's hockey. Josh Bartosik and Jeremy have more.
Thank you, Annika and Cassie. The Penn State hockey program now has a new points leader. This past weekend, forward Tessa Janicki netted 4 points in a series sweep over Lindenwood to move into first place all-time for the men's and women's teams. I'm here with Sportsnight insider Josh Bartosik to break down Janicki's stellar career up to this point.
Yeah, I mean, look, what more can you say about Tessa Janicki? Leads the program for both men's and women's with 142 points. This year, beating Nate Susi, Natalie Heising, 2 fantastic players. She truly is the greatest player of all time, or the GOAT, so far for both men's and women's. And she hit the ground running coming to Penn State 3 years ago. 47 points in her freshman season, the most by anyone on Penn State women's hockey. Fastest to 100 points, only took her 78 games near the end of her sophomore season as well. So she's just racking up accolade after accolade after accolade, and she still has another year left in her if she really wanted to continue, or if she wanted to go play national or internationally, she very well could at the end of this season. But there is no one in my mind that is better than Tessa Janicki, who's done more for either the men's team or the women's team than what she has done. I don't know where this team would be without her, but they certainly wouldn't be number 8 in the nation and currently on a 10-game win streak.
Yeah, you could say this team is live or die by Tessa Janicki, but you can't be, like you said, on a 10-game winning streak, undefeated in your conference, playing through and only through one singular player. So who and what have, contributed to this 10-game winning streak, and, where is Penn State at? Where's their program at right now?
Well, we'll start with the who, and really it's Abby Stonehouse and Grace Outwater. Those 2 players have been fantastic. They were 2 of the highest touted recruits coming into Penn State this past season, really since Tessa Janicki came in. And they both started the year off slow. Obviously, as a freshman, you're trying to get your feet under you, and Penn State's non-conference schedule was very tough to start the season. But recently, they've been great. Stonehouse had a 4-game goal streak earlier on during this win streak. It started against Bemidji State, which is when that win streak really started. And then for Outwater, she got a couple of Rookie of the Week accolades to her name. She's got 7 goals during this streak, which is half of her season total, and she's found herself 4th on the team in points as a freshman behind marquee names like Tessa Janicki, like Caitlin Roberts, and the emergence of Maddie Christian. So for her to do that as a freshman is fantastic, and these two players are going to continue to get better and better, and the program will be left in a great place once Tessa Janicki eventually leaves, because these two will be leading the charge.
Yeah, these two leading the charge. But, let's turn our heads a little bit more towards the rest of the season, not to look too far ahead. But Penn State does play in a pretty weak conference, as, seen and noted by this 10-game winning streak so far. But there are two teams, especially this win over number 3 Minnesota, looking at their out-of-conference schedule, how is that going to play out for them if they do end up making that NCAA tournament?
It's huge for Penn State, right? And really, Jeff Cambersol's kind of done this the last few years, recognizing that there's no way you have to put a damper on it. It is the worst conference in college, in women's college hockey, the AHA. There's no way to beat around the bush there. So he's kind of been stacking up the out-of-conference games. They played ranked UConn earlier in the year. They won that game. Huge win on the road at number 3 Minnesota. That was massive. That's part of the reason why they are now number 8 in the country. And really, for Penn State, it's not just that they don't win the AHA. It's a disappointing season because they didn't win the conference. But if they don't win the conference, they're probably not making the NCAA tournament, despite the fact that they are a top 10 team currently. It's kind of like what we saw with men's volleyball a few years ago, where they were a top 3 team in the nation, lost their conference tournament, and didn't make the tournament. The same thing would happen to Penn State women's hockey. So it's good that they have those wins out of conference, and it's important that they win the rest of the, pretty much basically win out the conference, and especially win the conference tournament. And when they get to the NCAA tournament, those non-conference games against teams like Minnesota and UConn will really help them to hopefully propel them towards their first ever NCAA tournament win.
Yeah, and these are two teams, between Minnesota and that win over UConn, two teams that they will potentially see down the line as we head into the NCAA tournament. Hard to beat a team twice, but when you've got the experience, a 6-2 win on the road is a 6-2 win on the road. So the Penn State women's hockey team does go on the road yet again and will not return home until the following weekend when Mercyhurst comes to town. A break from Pagula lines up with a break for us, but stay here for the remainder of the Dear Old State update after this short message.
Hey everybody, thank you for tuning into this edition of Penn State Sports Night.
For all of us here at the Belisari Media Center, we are
Penn State Sports Night.
Live from the campus of Penn State University, this is PSN News.
Penn State Network News is a student-produced, bi-weekly live news show featuring all student talent.
From local and national news to sports, entertainment, weather, and live interviews, we have it all.
We also feature student-made packages from across campus.
Airing every Monday and Wednesday at 7 p.m.
We are PSN News.
Be sure to check us out on Twitter and Facebook at PSN News, on Instagram at Penn State Network News, and to subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/PSN News.
Have a good night and stay safe, Penn State. Hey everyone, we are Red Carpet News, your main source of entertainment news at Penn State University.
Man, this festival is going to be popping.
I'm Alex Porzillo, here with Aiden Harold.
He's going to 23rd with Daddy Elon Warbucks to actual space away from Kim.
So in sync, especially during Kendrick's part when they came out, reporting on anything from music, movies, TV shows, fashion, to celebrity gossip. You don't want to miss out on any of the hot topics we discuss. Find our segments on YouTube under the name Red Carpet News for your daily dose of entertainment. We are Red Carpet News.
Welcome back to the Dear Old State update. From the ice to the hardwood, we head over to the Bryce Jordan Center for a team that's had an up and down season. Men's basketball sits at 13-9 overall, but 3-7 in conference play. Beat reporters Amanda Vogt and Maya Vealing have more on Mike Rhodes' team.
Thanks, Annika. It's been quite a journey for Penn State men's basketball, and the road game results haven't been great. Earlier this evening, the Nittany Lions were in Ann Arbor, Michigan for its second straight road contest since its home win against Rutgers last week. Penn State had a late lead, but Michigan finished the game on a 9-0 scoring run to win by 4. Maya, what's your biggest takeaway from this latest matchup?
What really surprised me tonight was the amount of turnovers. Penn State had their season worst with a total of 18 turnovers, and they were only able to force 9, which is also surprising because they are ranked right now for having a very good record with forcing turnovers this season. And of course, they followed their trend of getting a late lead and giving it up with those 9 points they let Michigan have at that end and to secure the win. But there is one bright spot for Penn State, and that is Nick Kern Jr. He did great in this game. He led the team with 16 points, a double-double, and 10 rebounds, and he has been making a super smooth transition into being an important player for the starting 5.
Yeah, and that's largely in part of Penn State playing without Puff Johnson for the past few games. He's been dealing with what we think is a right wrist or hand injury, been wearing a brace cast-like thing. And Ace Baldwin Jr. also hasn't been 100%. He's been playing 100% of the minutes, was in for all 40 tonight. But after he took a charge when they played Illinois a couple weeks ago, just hasn't fully been quite right, missed the game against Oregon. And now if you watch closely, when they take those breaks, he does not sit down when the rest of the people are getting a breather, getting some water. He stays standing, stays loose, keep his back nice and not letting it get tight. But this game just further exploits the road struggles this team has. And we saw it last year too in Mike Rhodes' first season when they finished the season 2-8 away from Happy Valley. Not a mark you want to continue. It's hard to keep momentum going when you get a win at home and then just kind of let it taper off. Had some rough ones a couple weeks ago. That Illinois lost by a margin of about 40 or so. But now these games are getting closer. Is there anything positive we could take away from those struggle? Because I know Mike Rhodes likes to stay very positive.
Well, as you mentioned, they are only 1-5 for away games this season, which is not looking good.
Yeah.
And most of those losses recently have been against ranked opponents, which I'll cut them some slack. It is tiring, but it's not looking great. With about a month left in the season, though, if anything is going to get them out of this slump, I do think Mike Rhodes is going to play a large part in that. He consistently preaches the mentality of the team. Just last week, he was saying it is so important to how the players respond to these losses. He wants them to learn from their mistakes, to become better players, to better the team, and to better the program. So I think Mike Rhodes could lead this team out of the darkness, and I do see a lot of potential in this Nittany Lion team if they're able to pick up some momentum on the road before this season ends.
Yeah, closing out the games is going to have to be a key factor into that. Against Rutgers, that first true away game, this is only from those games. This does not include any neutral site matchups they had in the beginning part of the season. When they played Rutgers on the road, it did not look like the Nittany Lions that we see play in the Bryce Jordan Center. They kind of lost their identity a little bit. We talked about the turnovers today not being where they're at against Michigan. These key factors, which is what this Penn State team prides itself on, needs to continue when they are away from home. But luckily, before they take another trip outside of Pennsylvania, they'll come back to Happy Valley. Now let's talk about that matchup. The bottom half of the Big Ten Conference, not easy. Talked about how some of these teams that they've lost to have been ranked, but now the remaining schedule are teams that have a combined conference record below 500. So it's very different from their front-loaded schedule. So with Ohio State coming to Happy Valley, what makes you think that this could be another turning point, but this time hopefully for sustained success for the Nittany Lions?
Well, Penn State right now has a 3-7 record in Big Ten play. They stand at number 13 in the conference. Ohio State just ahead of them at number 12. So I do think it will be a very good matchup between these teams. Also, Penn State is coming home. They're going to have home court advantage. They're looking to redeem themselves.
Yeah.
So not going to get ahead of myself, but I do think they do have a slight advantage. In addition to this game being the return to rec hall game, which is a huge thing every year, a lot of students turn out for it. So the crowd will be big. It's the whiteout. Energy will be up. So the energy will be up in the stands, which we've heard from Rhodes and the players previously that when the fans are energetic, that gets them excited and really helps them get their momentum going. So I think this game will be very good and it will be a test for Penn State, but I do see them possibly securing the win this Thursday.
Yeah, Mike Rose's Sweat With Us message early on in the season really brought some energized crowds to the Bryce Jordan Center, and especially with last year's turnout in Rec Hall, they don't expect anything different. But you mentioned that they're number 13 in the conference. That standing matters just a little bit more than it has in previous years now that Oregon, Washington, UCLA, and USC have entered the Big Ten. Only 15 teams will play in the Big Ten postseason tournament. So 3 teams will not make that event. And so Penn State, if they want to cling to hopes and cling to make a run like they did a couple years back, which earned them a berth in March Madness. And we're jumping way ahead here. But this is a team that felt they had a lot of potential, and these road issues have kind of plummeted those odds for them. So they need to start building these wins, take advantage of a lighter Big Ten schedule. I say that lightly because these teams are very hard regardless. The Big Ten is a beast of a conference, according to Mike Rhodes. He always says how it's not easy to win here. So it'll be an interesting test to see how Penn State picks it up with just about a month left to go before the regular season concludes. But be sure to follow along for our coverage of Penn State's return to rec against the Buckeyes. Now back to you, Jeremy and Annika.
Thanks, guys. Spring is just around the corner, but winter sports are not stopping yet. There's still plenty of action to come. Women's and men's basketball return to Rec Hall this week as the women's team hosts Maryland on Wednesday at 6 p.m., while the men's team welcomes in the Ohio State Buckeyes on Thursday at 6:30.
We'll also have coverage of the wrestling meet Friday night in the Bryce Jordan Center, and the men's lacrosse team opens up their season Saturday at 1 p.m. in Panzer Stadium when Colgate comes to town.
For more content surrounding Penn State athletics, follow us on Instagram and X. Plus, be on the lookout for more weekly sports updates and game day packages right here on YouTube.
For Annika Wagner, I'm Jeremy Rose. And for the rest of us here at Penn State Sports Night, thank you so much for tuning in and have a great rest of your Monday night.